So hi everyone, it's a pleasure for me to introduce you to Claire Cisowski, and she's going to tell us about pursuing a career in academia from PhD student to research fellow, and we are all looking forward to hear how to become a research fellow. So thanks, Claire.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Okay. So thank you, Sally, for inviting me to this seminar today. So I will be presenting a little bit of my path from PhD student to research fellow. And I have tried to make it more for students. So I try to put some advice on the way of what I learned from my own experience, and I hope that it will benefit some of you. So let's get started. So I am French. I have done my study in France. I first entered in the university in Lyon. So this is the city of France, where I went to the university to do what we call a licence, which is what is your undergraduate for you in physics. So after I was done with my licence, I had the opportunity to do an Erasmus year. So as an exchange program to go to the UK of 1 year. So if you have the opportunity to do this kind of exchange, I know that Erasmus now is going to be changed, but there will certainly be a program that will replace it now. I strongly recommend it because, well, apart from continuing to study what you would have studied in your home university with a different perspective, so a different way of teaching, you also get to meet people from all over the world. And usually the university has it all well organized, well planned to welcome international students. So you don't have to worry too much about finding a flat. Usually you can find some arrangements and you can just enjoy your time there. So if you have the opportunity to do so, I would encourage you to do it. When I was done with my license, so I got my diploma, I decided to follow on a master. So a master in France is 2 years. It's like a specialization that you do. And I chose to specialize in environment, atmosphere, and radio protection, because at the time I wanted to continue to be an engineer after I was done with academia. So I wanted to go to the industry because, well, it was what interested me at the time. And at the end of my master degree, I went to Brazil to do an internship, as it is required in your master degree in France. The reason I went to Brazil is because I will be honest with you, as I fell in love with a Brazilian when I was in my Erasmus year. So he was in Brazil. I came back to Brazil to stay with him for a little bit longer. And also I had the opportunity to do my internship there, so everything was perfect. So I went to Brazil without knowing how to speak Portuguese, so that was quite an adventure per se. And I was glad I had done the Erasmus year before as a warm-up, because this is not necessarily easy to go from one country to another. I did my internship, and what I was doing during my internship was to determine a zone of safety around a thermoelectric power plant. So that was my internship. It lasted 6 months and I did not like it. So the problem is I discovered that I didn't like staying in front of my computer and doing simulations on a software that I knew. I realized that in fact I prefer to do research. I prefer to tackle problems that people don't have the solution to yet. And I prefer the academic environment. So I was reaching the end of my master and I had decided that maybe engineering wasn't a path for me. So I wanted to go back to academia. This is where I had to make the decision of starting a PhD. So how did I get my PhD? I just sent some emails in the city that I was, and especially in the optics group, because I remembered that optics was, you have both parts of experimental and theory, which is interesting for me. And well, it also gives you the possibility, if you change your mind later, to go to industry in theory. So I went to that path, and I went to the interview where they proposed me a research topic, which was about orbital angular momentum of light. So for those who do not know, light waves normally have a planar wavefront as they propagate, like this one here, or roughly planar. And there are some beams of light that actually have a twisted wavefront, a helical wavefront, like this one here. And because of this twisted wavefront, you have all kinds of interesting properties that wouldn't happen in normal beams of light. You have a singularity in the middle that appears as a black spot in the middle of your beam. You can encode some information there. You have some interesting topological properties. With this beam, you can manage to make particle moves because you have orbital angular momentum. So that sounded like a very good research topic, and I was very interested about it. So I signed up for my PhD. Except that when you do a PhD, you also often think that this is going to be a smooth way, but in reality, you realize that there are a lot of ups and downs in your PhD. And I started with a big down right in the beginning, because I had signed my PhD with an advisor, which was expert in orbital angular momentum. And it turned out that a few months after I signed up, this professor went into a depression, and I never saw him after that. So that was the first trouble that I had to cope with during a PhD. And in this time, it's very important that you seek help. And I managed in the end, hopefully, to find another professor who would be my advisor, and everything went well. But it's just to tell you that hopefully it won't come to that, but there are always some adventures that happen during the PhD, and up to each of you. So I've compiled a few advices for you, which are quite general, but I hope it's helpful. So I think the most important one before you start your PhD or even a postdoc or any academic position is that you have to know the team. You have to speak to the students that work there, if it's by email or by person, without their advisor, because you need to find an advisor or PI that you can talk to. And this is the most important thing, I think, because you will have problems, personal problems, problems from the lab. Everybody has some problems at some point, and you want this PI to be there to lift you up, to help you, to understand when you are going through something hard that you need some time off, to help you become a better person academically. So this is a very important choice, maybe sometimes even more important than what the lab produces of research, how many publications they have. Of course, it's important, but this, with respect to the quality of your advisor that you're going to find, is really important. The second advice is that your PhD is a marathon, not a race, because you will be dedicating several years of your life to a PhD. And this means that you have to take care of yourself, or of your mental health, of your physical health, which means be careful about how much you work. Work a reasonable amount of time. Do not go crazy hours. It's not worth it, except if you have important deadlines, but it should never be the rule. So really take your normal hours like it should be. Expect ups and downs, especially if you're working in experimental physics. There are some weeks that nothing is going to work and you don't know why, and you don't know where you are going or if this is going to be solved. And a week later, everything runs smoothly again. So keep in mind that you are going to go through some experimental that don't work, and at the end of the road, you are going to get there. So don't get discouraged if this happens. It's completely normal. And going with that, is try to find a subject or to work on a topic that you love, because having passion about what you are doing will carry you a long way. This is what will help you stay motivated during these downtimes, which takes me to the next point, which is that I believe in the UK is the same as in Brazil, but your project is not written in stone. That means that you can always discuss with your PI what you prefer to do. If you like experimental more, if you like numerical simulations more, and with your PI, you can try to shape your PhD so that you continue to like what you are doing and still have a say in what you are doing. And this is why it's important to have a good PI as well, that actually listen to you and help you go in that direction. What matters in the end of your PhD usually is going to be different from what you proposed in the beginning. So some things are going to work, some others not, and you are going to shape your PhD in that direction in the end. And what matters is the consistency, that it makes sense when you arrive in the end of your PhD, that you did some decisions that took you until now, and that you have this path that you have followed until there. Another important point is ask for help if you are stuck. Do not wait too long. Be proactive. Go to, if you don't want to speak to your PI directly, go to a postdoc or to a colleague of you that may be there for longer than you, and ask questions. There is no stupid questions. I still continue to do questions on group meeting, and I think it's totally normal and everybody should do it. So this is why it's important. Ask all the questions, even though you think they are stupid, during your PhD, instead of waiting until the day of your viva and someone asks you this question and you don't know how to answer. So try to ask the questions along the way. Another important point, of course, now this year especially, it has to be taken with a little bit of caution, but try to go to conferences, because there is a part of, especially if you want to continue going to academia, there is the work that you're going to produce through publication that you need to disseminate and make the world know about it. And you need to know who is working on this subject, to meet them personally, to try to build a connection for them to remember you. So when you are done with your PhD, you can have maybe some opportunities of going in that group. They will know you already. It makes things easier. And this is very important. And even your colleagues, you are going to find the same persons that work in your area from one conference to another. And most importantly, it's fun to go to conferences. Usually you go to another country, it's always an experience. So it's all beneficial. If you can, if you have the funding, or if you manage to find some grant, go to conferences. And another thing on that subject is you can always find something to present to a conference. A poster is easier to do than what you think. There is always something you can find with your PI. You can discuss, oh, I'm not sure that this work is mature enough to be presented, and they will always find a way for you to present something. So don't be blocked if you don't feel ready to present your work. There's always something you can present. Another point is that in research, you are going to be criticized in a way, how can I say, it's going to be harsh questions, or sometimes someone is going to say, oh, you shouldn't write your research like this, or you shouldn't use this equation. And this is completely normal. And this can be hard to accept at the beginning, that you are going to be wrong sometimes or not. But you should welcome it as a way of that person that is going to criticize what you just did, that you spend so much time working on, because that person means well. This person usually wants just you to be a better self and to improve what you have written. So don't take it personally if your advisor tells you to rewrite half of what you have just written in your thesis. It's normal. It's just because they think there is a better way, and you have to understand both parts and don't take it as something personal. Another advice is that usually when we work in research group, you will have your colleagues around you, and it's important to try not to compare yourself to them too much, because everybody works differently. Some people need to work more to do the same amount of work as you or less. They might have a different goal. Some wants to publish a lot, some wants to go to industry, so maybe they are not so much interested in that, but they are interested in other aspects. So try not to compare yourself with others too much. If you want to know if you are doing well, and if everything is doing fine, just talk to your PI and ask them, how am I doing? Is there something I can do better for now? And finally, the last advice that I want to give about the PhD is have an exit plan 1 year before the end. And this is hard to hear because usually at the end of your PhD, you are focusing on writing your thesis, you have other things in mind, you are stressing out about the viva already. And in fact, this is the time that you have to plan for what's next. Because if you apply, for example, if you want to stay to academia and you want to apply for a fellowship, you have some delays you have some deadlines, and after they can take 6 months to a little bit more to give you an answer whether you are going to be accepted or not. So 1 year before the end of the PhD, try to go to conferences, already know which group you would like to work with, send them some messages, see if they are funding or not, and already start planning ahead this kind of things. And don't worry too much about not passing your viva, because usually your advisor will only make you go to your viva if they think that you can pass. So when they read your thesis, when they read your work, they will try to make sure that you arrive prepared at the day of your viva. So except if there is something going horribly wrong, which I don't think it's too often, you should be able to pass. Okay, so stay confident about that and start preparing about the after 1 year before. So despite all the troubles I had in the beginning of my PhD, I managed to find a wonderful advisor, even though it wasn't his area of expertise. He lifted me all the way to my PhD to make me publish and go understanding with me these concepts until we finally managed to, I passed my viva and everything went fine. I have some practical advice as well, more about your PhD. It's save your work on the cloud. It sounds obvious, but some people that I know already have lost some work because of that, and you don't want to spend months of data. Another practical advice is you will not remember what you just did in the lab or in your simulation in a few weeks. So note it down as if you are going to tell to someone else to redo your experiment. And maybe it's a case even, because sometimes you have new students that arrive and they'll just take your notes and go on from there. So try to take note of everything relevant in your experiment so you don't have to redo it. Have all the elements and more data than you need, than not enough. So when you are going to write your paper in the end, you will have everything you need. And another advice is for people like me who are quite shy or who the English is not their native language, try to practice public speaking. So you probably, I think most of the people on this call don't have this problem, but when you are not an English speaker, you have no idea how many people are terrified of speaking English. So many of my colleagues, they are ashamed when they start speaking, and you just have to try. You're going to make mistakes. It's not going to sound nice, but just go with it. And if people can understand you, that's enough. So try to practice public speaking with your colleagues. It can be in group seminars, or it can be at poster presentation, it can be at any kind of presentation. Whenever you have the opportunity, try to practice. And as a bonus, if you have time, it is good to get involved in an organization. So I will speak for the optics community. We have the Optical Society of America and SPIE, which is the European Society of Photonics, where you can, with your colleagues, you can build a group of students and you receive some fundings from this organization where you can do outreach activities, you can go to conferences, you can organize events. So this is a lot of initiatives that you can take beside your research. And does it take a lot of time? I would say not so much, because in my old group, we were, you see on the picture here, I think we were about 3-4 active members and some occasional members that popped in. And I think we planned maybe 2 activities per year, and it would not take so much of our time, in fact. So it was completely manageable. And at the end, on your CV, you have managing skills or soft skills that others don't have. You can say that you have been treasurer, president, vice president, that you have organized events. And this is all things that count after when you are going to do applications. So if you have the opportunity, try to get involved in something like this. It makes you grow beside of your research. We are not just research, you also have all the community that is funding what you are doing. Most of the time it's good sometimes to give something back. Okay, so when I was done with my PhD, I decided I wanted to continue to academia because I really liked the work that I did about orbital angular momentum of light. And I decided, I had this group here at the University of Glasgow that I was interested with. I had met the group leader at some conferences. And I sent an email asking if they had any position 1 year before the end of my PhD. And they say, okay, we don't have funding for the postdoc now, but we can try to do an application for a fellowship, which is what I did. So the difference between a postdoc and a fellowship is that a postdoc, you already have a project that this advisor has in mind. So you will have some independence. You're expected to have some more form of independence than in doing your PhD, but you still have this guideline of this project that was thought by someone else. And when you are doing a fellowship, you really build your project from scratch and you are going to bring this funding to the university. So you are in charge of your project. And of course, some people will still help you to make sure everything goes fine, but you are in charge of it. And this is well seen usually as a path to independence in academia if you want to do a lectureship later. So if you can, it's good to try to apply for fellowship, but of course it's not easy. So I've prepared a few points that can be helpful there. When you are writing a fellowship application, it's important to know what the funder you're applying for is looking. So it really depends. It's always a matter of you want to go in the right category, because if they are not financing what you're interested for example, if they are more interested in practical applications and you come with a theoretical idea, you're already out of the game to start with. So just make sure that you read all the requirements from the funder and be sure that you go in what they want to fund. The second one is probably harder. It's try to have an original idea. So of course it sounds easier said than done, but you can be helped at what you have been doing during your PhD, something that you didn't have time to look into it, but you think it can be interesting. This is where you can start to look for ideas, because the ideal is that it comes from you and this is something that you are an expert of and can bring something. When you write your research proposal, it should look realistic. It means that usually you will have, they give you like a schedule of your 2 years of fellowship, for example, with some milestones that you need to have achieved by each month that you are going to create, so that they can be sure that they are going to fund something that is actually going to result in some research output of some kind. So you have to show that you know what you are doing, that you know how you are going to do it as well. An important point that usually you have to write in the proposal is how is it going to benefit everybody? How is it going to benefit you? What are you going to learn from it? How are you going to grow as a researcher? What is the benefit of you to the institution? What is the expertise that you are bringing to them? And also, of course, for the funder, how does my fellowship goes within your goals? And even with all of that, even if you have written an excellent research proposal, it is not guaranteed that your application will be funded, unfortunately, because there is often a lot of competition. So I feel very lucky that my fellowship was accepted. But really, I think there is an element of luck as well. So if it doesn't go well, it doesn't mean that your application was bad. You can just try again. When you are going to submit your application, have someone else read it, because usually the funders, they are not necessarily from your area. They can be from another areas of physics. So try to have someone that is not working directly in your group or on your research project to read it, so that you have this external point of view on it. And also, it's important to note that if your application is rejected, some institutions are going to send you a feedback letter. So it's interesting for you to read it to see what worked, what didn't work, why didn't they accept it, where are the weak points of your application, so you can make it better for later. So I will just briefly talk about what I am researching. So in a nutshell, they have these vector modes that exist. So the vector modes, they have the electric field that oscillates differently in different positions. So it means that instead of being polarized in the same way on your beam, you are going to have an inhomogeneous polarization, as it's shown here in these two pictures. And because of these inhomogeneous distributions, this beam have some interesting properties. For example, they will focus better. And focusing better can be a good thing if you want to do imaging. And these beams, we know how to generate them very well in laboratories, but we haven't done too much work yet on how to generate them on silicon chips. So this is what the problem I want to address. Because if you manage to put them on silicon chips, after it means you have more portability, it means that it's smaller as well. It opens new possibilities. And the way I want to do that is I want to use what is called geometric phase of light. So what is a geometric phase? If I have to give an equivalent in the classical world, it would be like the rotation a cat has to do when it falls from an upside down position. So just by twisting, changing its shape, he managed to do a rotation. And with light, normally when light propagates, it naturally acquires a phase over time. But I can decide to also give it an extra phase, this geometric phase, if I do some polarization transformation, some mode transformation, or what interests me, when I take light out of the plane. So what I do is I try to take light out of the plane in this kind of structures, like this Mobius strip here on a silicon chip, try to induce this geometric phase, and with this phase, I can try to generate this kind of beams. So this is what I have been proposing, and this is what has been funded. So just to give you a little update on my personal situation. So I moved back to Scotland last year. I married that Brazilian that I had met in my Erasmus year, and we also brought a cat. So if you have any questions about bringing a cat on an international flight of 11 hours and more, I can answer this. And I got funded. I managed to have a fellowship that is from the Royal Societies, the Newton International Fellowship, which is open for non-UK scientists. And I've been working since in the optics group of the University of Glasgow. Here we can see some of the members of the group before the pandemic. And I have had an incredible experience here so far, and I hope it will work well. Now I still have 1 year to go in my fellowship, so soon I will start going for the next fellowship application. So, and hopefully after I will try to get a lectureship. So if you want to stay in academia, I think that there is still a couple of years after you're done with your PhD, it's important to consider, but it does get better than with your PhD, at least after you have your own project. I find it exciting. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope this was helpful for some of you, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Claire. That was really, really nice, and it was honest. It was, yeah, I agree with you in all the points, and it was really nice to see your adventure, how everything moved, and that everything went well with the Brazilian. That was nice to see. Cool. So I'm gonna stop the recording now, and I'm gonna open for questions.